Hey everyone, welcome back to Mindful Notions, where we help young professionals do more with less. This is episode 4 of our newest series, Accessible Intelligence. I'm, as always, Sam, your host, with my co hosts, Hillary, Austin, and Megan. And if you've been an avid fan, you will already know that for each of these episodes, one out of the four of us serves as the point person, where we basically interrogate them and ask them why they're doing what they're doing, but in a nice way, of course. And essentially, we're all somehow related to the AI field and we're bringing together perspectives. And today, we're focusing on the one and only Megan Chen. And what Megan is doing is, as you can tell, she is not with us. The three of us are in New York right now, but she is in London. And Megan, do you want to tell us a bit about what you're doing there right now?
Yes. So I moved to London 4 weeks ago. And yeah, I'm working on a startup now. Sorry, there's a bit of an echo. Do you guys hear that?
No, sorry.
Okay, it's just a me problem. I'll try to
Yeah,
tone down.
Megan didn't fly out of London to New York for this, so any technical issues she has, it's kind of like on her.
I
So
think she's pausing for time to remember what she's doing there.
Wow. No, guys, I do remember, I swear. Okay, so I just moved to London 4 weeks ago. I'm working on a startup now. It's building AI agents for strategy consulting work. And yeah, I kind of decided to drop my job in the US. I was going to in DC to pursue this full. So that's what I'm doing now.
and what's the name of your startup and where can people find it?
Yes, it's called Fig, and you can find it on figai.netlify.app.
I will start with the questions and then Hillary Austin, please jump in. But why AI in this way? Like, why strategy consulting? To my best understanding, you yourself have not been super involved with strategy consulting before, but why this specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my original goal was to work in GovTech and build technology for governments. I think for anyone who's had experience working in government, you know how slow and technologically outdated they are. And coming from someone who worked in government, building for governments was something that I really wanted to do. But we quickly learned how challenging that is because governments move so slowly. So what we were building for them essentially originally was a strategy tool, like an AI internal strategy tool. Um, and it was a lot of fun, but it was just so hard for them to implement it and uh, actually use it because there's long. Then we kind of pivoted and started trying to see where else we could implement the technology and kind of land on strategy consulting because this is a strategy tool. But with the goal of hopefully one day, once we've proven its usefulness, to kind of pivot back to servicing the public sector and businesses.
So for as a fellow, fledgling AI startup pioneer in the space, I've used ChatGPT before. I feel like a lot of people, hear the term AI founder, sounds amazing, but then you go about it and it's like, okay, what does it even mean to create a company? So what was like the first steps of you're like, I want to found a company. I want to
Yeah.
do this AI startup thing. You just like start work on a product. How did this all come together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've always wanted to be a founder. I think maybe it's part of the Kool-Aid of going to school in New York or something.
But she didn't do. She dropped out.
Yeah, right, right. Um,
That's false information, by the way. Megan, stay true to your story.
well, yeah, I actually did go to college, but I went to college at Barnard in New York, and we kind of like grew up hearing about Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college to form Facebook. When I was there, a lot of my classmates were kind of doing the same, building their AI startups, and it kind of being in that bubble makes you realize the possibilities that can come with pursuing a leadership, but they realize that that's a valid career path to pursue. And I think probably in my junior year, I started to seriously consider like what it would look like to pursue building my neighbors, and not working at a company or something like that. Um, yeah, so I feel like it was kind of like I spent a long time this year building just like random project, pivoting a lot. So what I'm working on now was not what I was working on in September of last year. But kind of like came to a point where I feel like I knew enough about what it would look like to be an entrepreneur to actually feel confident enough to quit my job and then pursue this.
What does that mean? What is it to be an entrepreneur?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
how are you confident in that?
No, that's honestly, I think you're right. There's nothing that really is that gives you the right building blocks to go off and build something on your own. But I think it's um, knowing that you have the right people in your network to kind of piece together things or to feel like you can. Um, Having financial stability to be like, okay, I will have a roof over my head. I can support myself doing this, even if like I probably won't make money for the next few months. And then for me, it was like having a support network. So what was really important for me when I moved to London was finding other people who are just working full time on their different ventures. So I found this place called Slug in London, which is this kind of a WeWork workspace, but just for young kind of entrepreneurs or creatives who are working full time on building anything from like a media company to like AI for architecture to like a platform for helping people find their roommates. But I think finding that sort of like environment was important for me to feel like I could just surrounding myself with people who are doing something similar.
I think in the spirit of this podcast a little bit, which is we always like ground like what's happening kind of in a more specific timeline. I want to sort of ask you to contextualize your experience a little bit more in this current era because you were talking about how at Barnard you got exposure to all these like entrepreneurship communities, right? Which I would say like have not always existed, but have existed for quite a while, right? Like entrepreneurship clubs are, I would say, like pretty traditional clubs at a lot of schools.
Mhm.
But we're clearly seeing now that there is this new era of like founders of like Gen Z we're talking about it in this like the title, right? Like Gen Z founders like dropping out of school. You may or may not drop out of school specifically, but like, very young is the point, right? And you go on to really believe in yourself and found your own community. So or found your own company and your own community, I guess. But I'm sure it's hard because that is like this is the moment where you grew up and you became a founder. But if you could zoom out a little bit and think about like what made your entrepreneurship experience at Columbia different and feel uniquely temporal.
Mm, that's a really good question. I think like timeline wise for me, we all started college like in the pandemic. And I think the pandemic is really when I started to see people our age building and like launching kind of like businesses. During COVID, a lot of people were building um things for frontline workers. Anything from like recycling PPE and building like kind of like face masks from like materials that existed in their house and then giving it to workers or creating like communities online because all of a sudden Zoom became such a big thing and human connection became something that we craved when we were all like social distancing and in the pandemic. And I think that's when I first started to see a lot of my peers like build things, launch nonprofits, and that sort of entrepreneurial sense, I think, started to become like very top of mind for me. And then in college, we all witnessed ChatGPT come out, and I think that led to a wave of people building things on top of OpenAI and ChatGPT, like these LLM wrappers, for anything for like from therapy to like nutrition agents to help us like figure out how to eat better to uh, what we might have seen most recently, Pluli, which is the startup that spun out of a Columbia student. Pluli is a platform that lets you feed on everything. But it's basically an AI that has context of what's going on your screen and can help give you insights from interviews to like anything that you might interact with on your computer to like Series, which is a startup that's spun out of a Yale dorm and they are building AI agents to help you network with other people in the educational ecosystem. So like other students from other universities. And I don't know. I think it's very interesting that I feel like a lot of people from our kind of year, 23-year-olds who kind of grew up from the pandemic, had all this free time to kind of build and ideate and kind of, you know, twiddle our thumbs because we had nothing going on. There was no school. To probably that being the catalyst for why so many people I feel around me where it felt empowered to go off and like build things and pursue that as as a career instead of like what might be more traditional and going into like a corporate job.
With Cluely and Series, it's not just about the products or services that they're offering. It's also how they brand. For Cluely, their manifesto, it's not even like a mission or vision statement. It's called a manifesto. They say that we want to cheat on everything. Yep, you heard that right. Sales calls, meetings, negotiations. If there's a faster way to win, we'll take it. And then a few lines later, they say, yes, the world will call it cheating, but so was the calculator, so was spell check, so was Google. I feel like if you're anyone probably above the age of 25, you're probably just like, where's this arrogance coming from? And I am curious if you have felt that at all, Megan, where when you talk to anybody who is slightly to more than slightly older, is there any dismissiveness that comes from a lot of this branding that is built on a lot of confidence, which I'm not saying isn't deserved or justified, but it's a very specific brand of like confidence, borderline arrogance of how young people are changing the world. Like how are the older generations reacting based on your conversations?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's very mixed. I feel like I know people who are older than me who feel very miffed by the fact that people our age are transitioning and career pivoting quite a lot. Because in my mom's generation, you go and you pursue one career path and you stick in it for like 35 years until you retire. And I think people are very confused at the fact that, yeah, you don't have to stick to one career path. You can pivot. In addition to all that, you don't have to pursue what might be an additional career path. But I think the fact that we're kind of products of very challenging circumstances. We went through the pandemic, which was something that no one in the generation before us had to experience. Kind of like training our minds to be like, things don't have to be normal and things aren't always going to go according to plan. And I feel like maybe because we've kind of lived through these very uncertain circumstances, nothing seems out of the ordinary for us. Something like building a company built on cheating and everything and having that sort of audacity is nothing that is too hard to kind of use because we kind of lived through an unbelievable kind of upbringing. Yeah.
I actually have a reaction to the Cluely manifesto you said, right? Um, yeah, so in my most recent Musings article, we actually, which is on Scaffold under the subtab Musings from the In Between. But anyways, so the person I was interviewing we were talking about slash around this concept of cheating in school, right? And we were saying like, talking about his use of and I say around because it genuinely is ambiguous in that sense where like you're using it to help you with your classwork or your homework, right? Like, you know, what exactly is wrong with that, right? And I think someone who like a professor could very easily look at that situation and be like, hey, you're cheating, you're not like committing to the integrity of the academic process. But something I find time and time again with not only that conversation but other people who talk about using AI for schoolwork, it's kind of reflective of broader structural issues, right? Like the reason why you're inclined to use AI and to even apply this framework of cheating is a sense of, well, there are gaps in the system, right? There are bigger structural issues at play that make it so like, you know, you may evaluate it as cheating, but the gaps are there. And like, why should I not take advantage of gaps that are there? Um, so yeah, that was just a quick comment about like how this I feel like mindset of like in a more negative sense, it's viewed as cheating. But I would say like one could just talk about it as like being pragmatic, being entrepreneurial, right? This broader culture, I think, is really born out of a lot of systemic factors. And we previously talked about it, like in relation to how entrepreneurship now is born out of the stifling of corporate capitalism and stuff like that. So like all that is to say, I just wanted to acknowledge that. I don't know if those you have thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we've honed in on the word cheat here, and how you've said that's a way to fill in the gaps of maybe structural gaps. And I think it's very similar to another word that's very AI coded, which is disrupt. There's this idea that I think it's fair to say disrupt traditionally has like a bad connotation, but nowadays I think it has a very positive connotation. You disrupt things to make it better. You disrupt it to build it anew. And so when you say disrupt, you almost imply that the structure is bad. It's either slow, it's inefficient, it can be streamlined. There's so many ways you can go about it. And I think that's what's also very interesting to me about these AI startups is, I think, going back to what you said about this word of like arrogance, kind of pure belief in a very good way, sometimes very bad, but many times very good way, that you can use this tool AI as a way to like carve new paths to make something that previously was structurally one way, structurally another way. That's good for the world in a way. But then I also wonder how, Megan, you balance this idea of, I think AI startups are very normative coded. I'm gonna use that word again. So now we're talking about AI coded. So how do you balance this idea of AI startups, entrepreneurship, all these things that seem to come with this word of like change the world, with working? I think most AI startups tend to be very built into business ecosystems, whether that be consulting, whether that be financial, infrastructure. How do you balance this in terms of, I think we talked about this last episode, but this one goal of just trying to make a company that works versus this other goal of trying to disrupt, create new.
Yeah. I find it very interesting, kind of like what was in that manifesto that Sam just quoted about like how the calculator was considered cheating. Just like using the internet for research at some point was looked down upon by like academics. And I find well, I think what excites me a lot about startups looking with AI to build like vertical products that service like a specific problem in an industry. So like consulting for me, but it might be like finance, it might be accounting, it might be like equity. You're building AI to help them make these systems more efficient, to help these organizations spend less time on the menial, tedious work so they can spend more time on interacting with people and clients. And I think that aspect really excites me. And of course, I think what's also very valid in these conversations is the concern of what happens. Like what if we're taking away all these menial tasks that people typically do, what then? I think that's entirely valid because I also feel like while I'm building an AI, I'm also very consciously thinking about the impact of the things that I'm making. Am I creating something that's actually allowing humans to do more meaningful work, or am I just taking away work? But at the same time, is this just a part of, the cycle of how things, when you create innovation, jobs aren't like going to go away, but new jobs are going to be created. Yeah.
Well, I think you talk about that like on Fig's website. The first sentence is like, let AI handle interviews, research, synthesis, and first draft deliverables so your team can focus on judgment, client trust, and outcomes. And then in the second sentence, you deliberately mention like keeping humans in the loop. So I think that is copied through. I feel like something that we've been talking about is how in this new era of very young founders, usually doing something AI related, it can feel like the community there is just other founders. You've shown that a lot in your content, Gen Z Bestie on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. Maybe not YouTube. I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm used to saying Instagram and YouTube. So Instagram and TikTok at least. And like you mentioned, the co-working spaces. But what we've seen in recent years is this sort of collaboration between bigger tech companies and individual content creators or founders. You collaborate with OpenAI not infrequently. And this past weekend, you hosted a Vibe hackathon with the support of OpenAI. I've done a lot of ambassador work with a company that I may or may not be joining. So we're not going to name drop it anymore for the time being. All opinions are my own. But like I've also been experiencing that the past few years of what support looks like from these bigger tech companies. So can you talk a bit about how you started doing work with OpenAI and what this new balance looks like of you're not obviously working there right now, but you still get support and you're still able to use their branding. It's something that I think about a lot, especially as I'm about to enter a role that, again, may or may not be related to that. So, yeah, how has your experience been with OpenAI so far?
Does it feel like
Yeah.
cheating to use Claude?
A bit, no. It's been really interesting because I think we talked about in one of our very early episodes about how OpenAI started out as a research lab, and then they came out with ChatGPT, and they're like, "Wow, this is a consumer product that people actually really like." And what I've been seeing from their side is them realizing because so many people are using their products, they can't afford to just ignore the fact that students apparently are actually the highest percentage users of this stuff. And then what does implications mean? And I've been seeing them trying to interface a lot more with students, with content creators who are kind of like in the young adult kind of category because they are so aware that their product is impacting our generation and people from the age of 16 to 24 the most. I've been seeing that to be really interesting. Something that they brought up this week that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on. They're trying now to partner with universities who give university-wide EDU accounts to all students. Because they're recognizing the fact that students are going to use this no matter what. They're trying to institutionalize it so that students don't have to, trying to find like a middle way between like schools being like, you can't use it, to actually helping them figure out how to take the taboo away from using AI in school, but like creating institutional support for it. How do you guys feel about that sort of thing? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have thoughts. I have actually slight experience with this, and that's one of the AI platforms that I like to use the most is Google AI Studio.
Mm.
And when I am on my Georgetown account, it is blocked. I cannot even access the website. So to access the website, I have to swap over to a different tab, which is on my work email because it's not blocked on that, obviously. One question I had for you as a follow-up to this is just thinking about this interesting distinction between how you just phrased it and I guess how I've been thinking about what's going on currently. Because I've been thinking about AI as this, firstly, something that these big companies like OpenAI are trying to research, innovate, and push to create increasingly better models. To do that and to make profit, one of the things they have to do is to market it, is to create it as a product that can go to individuals. So of course, and to do that, you kind of want to grab as much market space, market share as possible. How do you reconcile? I think there's certainly this idea that OpenAI, other companies see that students are using it. How can we allow students to use it best? But also there's this idea, everyone at this university gets a OpenAI ChatGPT accounts. They're locked in as almost a ChatGPT user. They're producing habits, going to use it more. that's a continued customer going forward once they leave the university and they have to get their own subscription. How do you navigate this field where tech companies, I think we like to think, and they are a lot more dynamic, a lot more friendly, a lot more personable than maybe FedEx. Sorry, that's not, don't sue us. But at the end of the day, it's a company. You know, it has shareholder interests, even though OpenAI is for now a nonprofit. Where do you find that balance, especially when you're working with it, of, you know, it is a product that's being marketed, that's trying to get people to use it, but also it's a tool for, I think, as we all think, very much good.
Sorry, could I actually interject here? You can re-clarify your question later as needed. But something else came up. Megan was saying it earlier, and then you picked it up and asked me else I want to say. Sorry, guys. Anyways, I think one clarification I just wanted to make here, and I know this because Megan and I have spoken about it previously, but when we talk about like AI and its impact on students within the context of like, you know, this institute talking about EDU accounts, we're talking about colleges, right? And you've mentioned that, and I'm saying you've mentioned this before because when you talk about open AI and it's like resources for students, disproportionately the demographic you're looking at is college students, right? And similarly, when you mention this idea of like a building user base, right? You're looking at it from the perspective of people who are college students and then like go on into like jobs, right?
Mhm.
I think it is important for us to also look at people who are not college students who are younger. And to me, this marketing idea becomes a lot more significant. And I think that's very intertwined with a different phenomenon, which is like the rise of social media and how it's proliferated amongst like younger people, right? Like, and I think to me, social media and like social media marketing is really the thing that makes these platforms like, you know, you can have all these institutional sort of solutions, right? Like you partner with a college university, right? But, and you know, maybe that will be really impactful for people who are within those institutions, right? But especially people who are younger, who are already less protected, right? Because, or more vulnerable rather, right? They they don't have as much institutional support. Plus, disproportionately, where they're getting their influence for these things is coming from like social media and from institutions that aren't really designed to serve them, right? Um, that was just a little caveat that I wanted to add. You can repeat your question if you want.
I mean, do you remember it?
In light of everything I've said
Light
about
of
children,
copy paste.
um, you can
What do you
repeat your
think about this nonprofit AI tool for good, but also business, marketing, consumers, the attention economy
Yeah.
intersection?
Yeah, I find it really interesting because I think OpenAI has done the best out of all of like the classic LLMs or Gemini, like Anthropic's product, and then ChatGPT. I think of all of them, ChatGPT is the most in your face when it comes to social media marketing and then marketing towards our generation. And I think that's also important what Hillary said because they continue to clarify that when they are doing these student campaigns are targeted towards university students. They're trying to target these universities to implement this EDU pilot program. And I think it's totally true because online their marketing is not, I don't think it's siloed to university students because the power users of ChatGPT are everyone younger than 20. It doesn't stop at like university students. And I do totally agree. I think like the younger kind of students before going to college are completely neglected in the conversations of how should we approach using AI, which has been shocking because I think it's a completely different field to market towards college students who grew up primarily without using AI, have developed their cognitive skills already, compared to students who are growing up with it. I think it's a completely different thing that I don't think they are equipped right now to like focus on, but also should be focusing on a lot more. Yeah.
I'm not going to disagree that chat and OpenAI are the most in your face. But I will say between like Chat, Claude, and Gemini, I actually think Claude might have a higher like beloved rate, at least among certain communities. Like Anthropic did a coffee pop up in New York last week that was all over my X feeds. I could not get away from it. Maybe I'm like the targeted demographic there, but like it was just constantly people reposting it, being like, "Wow!" Like, and it wasn't even like all love bombing. There's also like hate posting about it. Like that was like the discourse that it was driving. But I still think everybody from like me to like my parents to people I meet, like the one that comes up the most is still chat. So I think there's also that distinction there because when you're Google, you're not like, yes, your LLM's competing with OpenAI and Anthropic, but you're Google. Like you have a workspace that's used by like thousands of enterprise clients. And when we all, or maybe Austin is Perplexity, but I still use Google search, like I like just passively consume the AI overviews. That is Google. Like I think there's a different purpose there versus like OpenAI, the way it's branding itself is like trying to be as innovative as possible. Anthropic seems to be trying to carve out this like ethical innovation niche. Like it's also, I think, something that is continuously evolving along with the tech is the marketing and like how each company is impacting culture differently. Like again, with the Anthropic pop up, like a lot of creatives, especially, were like, this is just like a good marketing campaign. Like it's because the tech industry is so dry, like that they think like a coffee pop up's like disruptive and innovative, but like any good creative event can do this. Versus, I feel like when Figma went public and it became like a whole citywide event, I feel like there was a lot more appreciation, not just because, again, like the tech community really loves Figma, but because it felt truly like a celebration versus like a coffee pop up seems so novel for some people in the AI community because they're just developers or coders. Like, again, these are all just stereotypes, not like opinions. So I feel like there's also something to be said about what you said about maybe chat is marketing a lot, but I do think each company is like culturally impacting us differently, which is something that probably will take decades to study. Yeah.
Something that I find really interesting about, touching on like this marketing kind of strategy is that OpenAI doesn't pay any of its creators to make the content that they make. I've never been paid by OpenAI, but I just genuinely love their products. I know that Anthropic does pay their creators to make content. You'll always see like the paid kind of like warning tag on the videos. ChatGPT never has those because they don't pay their creators. And something I also recently learned is that Google Gemini makes their creators sign non-compete so that they cannot create content for any other AI companies. And OpenAI has never asked me to do any of that. And I find that also like very telling and like how they want to be community driven. Their users are driving their growth because their users are championing them. And I think we talked about this last episode with Negotiate, but I feel very much similar to what that's kind of reflected in what OpenAI is kind of fostering.
I think I want to blend what we're talking about now, which is like social media marketing, with what we like, with how we started with you talking about being a founder. I have kind of a theory, which is I really do think that these two trends are intertwined, right? Um, I think when you think about the lifestyle of a founder, in a lot of ways, I watch a lot of Day in the Lives, by the way. But I see a lot of similarities in terms of the entrepreneur spirit, the self drive of being like an influencer, right? It's you design your day from start to finish. You're working on multiple products in the form of like videos or whatever content you're creating, right? And I think, okay, so like to start, right? COVID, right? TikTok. You see a lot of influencers. See influencers go on and do their own thing, right? They're like people are quitting college. People, or maybe not quitting college exactly, but they're like, like they're deciding to graduate without a job and just pursue content full time. At the same time, we see this trend when it comes to entrepreneurs, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to do my own thing, right? And I think these things are pretty interconnected. And I just wanted to bring that up because I'm really curious about like all of our reactions here. I mentioned this to you before. But in some ways, like because we all create content, we have a bit of exposure to that lifestyle of, you know, having a very self-driven schedule to create something, which is framed in a maybe in a generous way as a taste of the founder lifestyle, right? I think I'm curious starting with you, Megan, but I do want to hear everyone's thoughts about just like for you in particular, like how does your identity as a founder in some ways blur between your social media sort of career and your more explicit career of like founding a company?
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like the content part of what I do, I always want it to be complementary, but not the primary focus of what I was actually doing, but more just as kind of like a way for me to share like what that process is like. So I feel like I always really appreciated watching those perspectives from other people. People who weren't full-time like creators, but used content to amplify what they're doing and kind of like connect with other people, either similar kind of experiences or people who
Thank you
guess
for the hearts, whoever just did that.
yes. Yeah, or to share learnings with people who like are interested in pursuing similar paths. Um, but yeah, I feel like we all have like been very entrepreneurial outside of our main kind of careers. And yeah, I'm also curious to hear like how you guys think about like using your platforms and whether that's connected or you keep that very separate from what you do in your.
There's no separation for me. I feel like it's very much just like part of it, which obviously has its downsides. But I think for me, going from podcast producer to this new role now, like I was talking about this with somebody yesterday, like these are not roles that would have existed before like 2010. Like both of my roles that I've had now out of college. And I think basically there's also this newer lane of quite young people being able to lead, I would say, like pretty big initiatives at organizations. And I think the fact that there's confidence in people to do that, just based on what Megan was saying about, of course, like being a founder is like everything is attributed to you, like your success, your failures, and all of that. And again, on Megan's accounts, Gen Z Bestie, she recommends teams of 2 to 3 to start to not be overwhelmed. I'm a fan, so I'm happy to plug that as much as I can.
He
But
has the 10 commandments.
That was
which is
wild.
all in S.
it's all in here. Check out the Cambridge Build House as well
Wow.
while you're at it. And the startup life is not as glamorous as people might think. So also check that out.
And she just attended the House of Lords.
Yes, she just attended the House of Lords. She also recently posted being a woman in a male-dominated field. It's pretty well. So yeah, you're gonna get what you want if you subscribe to Megan Chen. Yeah,
Wow, this is when you
that's all.
realize your friends are your real.
Yes, and you can also see Megan live next Saturday at the Cheerful Earful Podcast Festival in Balham with me. Okay, back to the regularly scheduled programming. But I think kind of parallel, like everything we've talked about with the founders being young and AI driven and like series like banking over $3 million pre-seed, like that's all true. And then there's also young people like in these big tech companies who are like leading like global programs trying to activate as many users as possible. Basically like being creators and influencers within the companies as well. So I wonder if those two tracks are always going to be the case, or eventually the goal is like to get everything in-house. Because like you said, Megan, like if you do anything to promote Google Gemini or AI, like you can't do it for other companies. And I wonder if that's going to become more of the case, like if that's the eventual goal, like if there's just multiple funnels in. But that's something I've noticed as well, like almost like in-house influencers and creators.
Yeah, I think this conversation is super fascinating because first of all, what Hillary brought up initially about AI startup founders living this dual life, it's basically like a celebrity in a way because you have these social media followers. You tend to, it's very glamorized, you know. Luckily, Gen Z Bestie is showing some of the not as glamorous parts and keeping it down to earth, but I think a lot of people don't. You know, or if you do, that's like the thing you'll do and it'll blow up. Like, oh my God, they're showing what it's like. It's very calculated. And where this is I think what you said about tying it into this COVID area where it's a lot of social media blowing up, TikTok blowing up, it made me think that I don't know if you can separate what's going on right now with AI from the attention economy in a way. Because all I could think about was how right now I just recently wrote a piece. I feel like everyone's talking about their things, so I just
Where
say
can people
that.
find it?
Where can people find that? My Substack,
Yes.
Austin Ellison. But I wrote about, is there a tech bubble, essentially? And I think it's a big question on everyone's minds. And the short answer is yes. But can AI actually become this tool that it's sworn to be? And for it to happen is it needs users. It needs users. And so it seems like if we take this angle again from like this economic business perspective, is this all just one way to kind of push this implementation, push this AI hype, push this AI thing? Because how this is almost, if you look at it from outside, from 2020 vision, it's almost the perfect thing you could do. You attach AI with this influencer celebrity lifestyle, and now it's on everyone's social media feed of, oh, you want to not work in corporate wage slave for the rest of your life? Do this. And it's very glamorized. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because, as I said earlier, I think everyone here agrees that AI can be a tool for good. And, and increasing this AI literacy, increasing this how much everyone knows about it, I think is a good thing. But also looking at previously, there's news this week or last week from ChatGPT, from one of its conferences. It released a product essentially that's integrating other apps into ChatGPT, whether that be payment features, whether that be able to book stuff all through ChatGPT. And all I can compare that with is like WeChat. It's a big Chinese app that basically is a super app. It does everything. And again, looking at this, what really connects or where this is all coming together for me is this idea of it's a company that's using almost the best way it can to grow right now, which is social media and tying it to fame, prestige. And it's creating something that almost won't lock in users, but it's trying to entrap them in this ecosystem. So that's what I really want to say in terms of this uniting attention economy with new technology is just super interesting, it seems.
I guess to combine the two a little bit, or like going back to your question, um, I think pursuing my own thing a little bit outside of work, and I think I have a slightly different experience from you, Sam, where I work in a big corporation, like multinational corporation, more traditional like corporate hierarchy. Um, there is this sharp sense of like dissonance between that and like my um like the work that I do at Scaffold, the work I do with this podcast. And I think that actually that dissonance is tied also to like my social media consumption.
Mm.
I wouldn't say I consume a whole lot of like founder content outside of you, obviously, Megan. But I do, like I mentioned earlier, I don't know why I'm harping on this so much, but I watch a lot of day in the life, guys. Like I watch a lot of influencer content. I don't know, maybe I'm exposing myself, but that is like the lifestyle that I see a lot on social media. And I'm like, oh, you wake up, you go to Pilates, you cook yourself breakfast, you study maybe. And I'm like, wow, like that is a self-directed lifestyle that like I really crave. And like it's really hard for me to separate that from like how I imagine like a founder lifestyle to be. This isn't like any sort of like formed opinion or anything like that. But like I really like I think through this conversation, I'm also like increasingly convinced of kind of how this unique era of like AI startups is really like the lifestyle and also how people perceive the lifestyle is really enabled by social media. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys feel like, I mean, I think as an influencer, you always think like, what's going to go viral? And therefore, curating your life to make the perfect day in the life. It's often what we speak. Do you guys think the content that shows like the more realistic side of things, if you saw a day in the life that was entirely monotonous, do you think that's something you would also consume or feel, or would that just not be something of interest because it's not athletic or unrealistic?
I actually think what you're pointing to is live streams. I think what's increasingly becoming common on platforms like Twitch, and I've talked to some content creators about it, is like Twitch, in case people don't know, it's mainly like a gamers live stream platform. Maybe I'm not even the one who should be talking about it with this guy sitting next to me. But increasingly people are using it for like co-working, or I've seen people post about it on LinkedIn where they're like, join my Twitch stream or something. Not, it doesn't have to be Twitch, but like these live streams of basically like a more extreme version of what you're saying. Like it's not going to be a 1 minute day in my life, but it's like, just come watch me work for an hour. Join me if you want. It's equivalent to putting like a 10-hour ambient noise YouTube video on while you work. It's almost like there's a space now for people to start creating there and also maybe monetizing. Like I'm sure there are people out there that are like, only paid subscribers can join this productivity expert for an hour where you just co-work, and that is a way to also monetize it and make money. So I almost feel like there are extreme versions of that now where like for an hour or multiple hours people are live streaming just like their work, also in a way to combat some industries where using AI still looked negatively upon. Like a lot of book talk is authors just like time lapsing them, handwriting or typing to show that they, in fact, are writing their 600-page novel or 1,000-page dissertation, whatever, because they have faced allegations of using AI or they are preempting allegations of using AI. So I think it also works the opposite way, where not only are people using it to show how they might be using AI as part of their process, but also it's being shown on how they don't. So I think Megan, I think people are doing it basically, but that doesn't mean that, again, a point that Austin made, obviously we're excluding Megan's content here, but some of this content, like life is hard, it's not that glamorous, it's very calculated. As somebody who is on the other side of that as well, at times, like there's a story there's a reason, and that's not a bad thing. But I think a general feeling I have about AI in education, or just like AI in young people, as it develops, like the principles don't change. Like you still need to understand that when you're being marketed towards, there are incentives to sell you something. There are incentives to make you feel something. We go to the movies to feel something. Nicole Kidman. We read books to learn. Like there are incentives, and it is up to us and being around good people and good actual communities to understand like what we want to take away from that. But even with AI, social media, I think those principles become even more important. Like there are other incentives than just pure information flows. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because we all want good products. We all want good services. But I think being conscious consumers is increasingly important because everybody's figuring this out together. Like we are all adults in this situation where we have to learn together. Yeah.
I do dabble in Twitch. I admit.
What do you do?
Not that much anymore. I used to a lot more. But I never heard of that. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess to answer that, the fact that I feel like I haven't heard of that means something. Even someone who knows about Twitch, I think a lot of people don't know about Twitch, never heard of that. To be fair, I don't really browse much. But I think that goes to show it exists, but it's definitely not the form of AI startup founder content. And where that leads me to think is, you asked, would you want to see it? Maybe that's just not what people want to see. My gut reaction to that was, yes, I do want to see it, because that goes back to my first question I asked, which is, I have no idea what it even means to be an AI startup founder. I've seen countless reels, short form videos that are saying, I'm a startup founder, but like Hillary says, it's more of a day in the life than it is any sort of, I don't know if you ever see work
Yep.
in it. You never actually see what they do. You just see that they live a good life, that they go to the cafe, they, run or whatever. Hillary, you can fill in more. But, and I guess that's a question I have. I'm not sure if anyone here knows, but whether that's a form of, if it's not viable, maybe people don't actually want to watch it, or maybe that's just not what people show. I don't know which it is. Personally, I think I would want to see that because I have no idea what it is to be an AI startup founder, what that entails. And that's a gap in the system.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I don't know if you guys saw the Wall Street Journal article about SF startup founders, and they essentially interviewed 7 young startup founders, like under the age of 26.
Yeah, we shared that article in the
I
chat,
that,
Megan.
yeah.
Like we're
Okay.
all aware of it.
I did
Okay,
see
yeah.
it, yeah.
Someone
perfect.
hasn't been reading the group chat, is what I.
This is more for like the general audience watching.
Right.
She's trying to be smooth. Because I think we discussed this like 2 episodes ago. So.
Yeah, and I think last
Okay.
episode too.
Okay, well,
Very specific.
everyone better be keeping up with every episode in chronology then. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting because they were basically like, yeah, we don't have a life. Our life is the office.
Yeah.
This is what we live and breathe. And that's non-consumable content. So I also do see how, like, the life of a founder is so glorified online because people are like, wow, this is awesome. I can work for myself. I can set my hours. I can work on things that I genuinely am interested in and not report to anyone above me. Bureaucracy, do is that. But I like the non-consumable content is what's so realistic, and it's that you're sitting at your computer, you're likely coding away or in meetings or just interviewing like possible customers all the time. And I think like there's also in the founder community like a very much a split of people who like to move in silence and not create content about their process, and then those that do, because those that like to be a lot more private about their life often look down upon those who are like building public. Because they're like, if you're thinking about the content you're creating about your day, which is probably a little unrealistic, are you actually working on your product business? I find that interesting. But I think for me, I started to like build in public because I was originally trying to build something in consumer. And when you're building in consumer, the best thing you can do for yourself and whatever you're trying to build is just try to get people to know about it as just like digital content. I've since pivoted a bit away from that, but have just found kind of like a community online, which is more of why I continue to do it. But I do find that a really interesting topic about, how much do you really share and how are you portraying that so that it's, perceived in maybe not such an unrealistic way. That's something that I do think about.
I was going to say shortly, maybe that's just going to how someone makes money, for people who are making content, they're influencers first, AI startup founders second. For people who aren't doing that, they're much more focused on actually just making the startup to make it monetized, etc.
Yeah, and it's not just money, it's also influence. It's also like knowing the right people and knowing what you can offer them and what they can offer you. I've never felt more DC in my life, but the past year of building tech communities in DC and now hypothetically doing that at a much larger scale, I feel like the idea of like tech communities now is like a living, breathing, changing thing where some of these events are just wild, just places that like are willing to partner for sometimes like nothing. Like sometimes they're the ones that want to host communities because they feel like there is influence there and there are valuable people there. And I feel like when I first was getting into the space, I was very confused how you could just like, this doesn't happen all the time, but like just book a venue without like spending a huge amount of money and like worrying about logistics that end up just being taken care of. And then who actually shows up? Because I feel like when you come out of an institution, especially college, I think you immediately assume that like everybody above you knows more, and maybe we're breaking that norm again with everything we've talked about. But I remember first coming out being like, great, like now I need to like work my way up the ladder, and anybody that's older than me automatically is like more experienced. I should talk to them. But now I feel like it's this weird mix of not every young professional, but just your like average, smart, ambitious young professional able to like punch up a lot faster. Because I do think, to my question earlier about the older generations and how they are viewing it, like, sure, they might be miffed, but the reason why we have series, the reason why we have Cluely doing well is because like older people are also paying attention. I've noticed that too in DC and also New York and other places. So I also think something that I noticed with young professionals who are able to do like what Megan's doing, what we're doing, I feel like it's also just a matter of understanding that you can be in the room now at a much quicker pace. Not necessarily like a room that you will feel the most comfortable in. Like, you'll definitely be humbled, but I think it's the ones that understand that as long as you are in the room, you will learn a lot faster. So it's also this idea of like in-person events. I know you mentioned the online community, Megan, but for me, like in-person community has been a huge shift for me, where you learn so much in like a 5-minute conversation in person with someone than like a 30-minute phone call, in my experience. So I think there's also that notion of what community does mean in the future, and something that I will definitely be thinking a lot more about.
And the lesson of the story, drop out of college.
So we haven't convinced you yet. This is the final.
One quick question, Megan, just as a maybe wrap up, or I don't know if you have other your
No,
quick round.
just ask your question.
Just curious, this community you're talking about, I forget its name. AI startup founder, Plugged. What is one thing as being in the room that matters? This AI startup founder room. What do people outside of it? What would they not expect to be there, or what's interesting about it? Something else like you can tell you guys are there.
That's a good interview question.
That was a really good interview question. I'll say I don't know how evident this is, or like, but I guess what I was looking for the most, or what I realized I needed the most, and it's not so much of like a tangible thing when you join these spaces, but it's more as like seeing people who are farther along than you in their like founder startup process is so helpful. Because even if you're not like directly interacting, you're like overhearing conversations with them on sales calls. You're like watching them build things. You're kind of like looking over and seeing people use tools you've never seen before, and kind of just being in that atmosphere with people who are farther along, better than you, have been in the game longer than you, has just been kind of like a game changer for me, because I've never founded anything before. I'm a first time founder. I think I'm incredibly inexperienced with everything, and I'm kind of just figuring it out. But joining these spaces, the thing that you gain from it isn't always like a tangible thing, but more of like it's like the spillover effects you get from just being in the room. And that's why I guess I recommend for anyone who wants to kind of dabble in, or like test the waters of entrepreneurship, to kind of find these spaces, whether it be a student club, whether it be going to like one of these events you find on Luma, where you can interact with other founders, to kind of just see how they think, see like the way they interact with people, or like talk about the things that they're building. I think all of those things have been super valuable, helping me figure out what it actually is to be an entrepreneur, whether it's something I really want to commit my time and life.
Okay, one question for the rapid fire today. So one single question, it's answering the title for all of us. So final verdict, go to college or found an AI startup. Megan, you can start.
Is that found, or like have success?
Like, just do it. Like, just found it. Not necessarily having success with it, but just trying it.
For me, I say found a startup.
Shocking. Okay, Hillary.
Maybe I'm influenced now in this current moment. I would also say found a startup.
I would say go to college. I for me personally, it was just a lot of development, and yes,
I would also say go to college, but we're all biased. Like we've all had our own experiences. I think for me, the biggest part of college was the traveling and understanding, like not just outside of your state or district, but outside of the country. Like I feel like Megan's not even in the country right now. I feel like that is just such a invaluable experience that like definitely continues to shape me. And yeah, I could get that opportunity through a startup, but I probably would have to work a lot harder for a lot longer first. So yeah, I would say also go to college. Wow, a gender split too.
Yeah. Because that's mean.
Oh no.
I'll check that in the comment.
I know. Men versus women the next episode. All right. That's been Mindful Notions, helping young professionals do more with less. If you are listening or watching on Substack, please consider recommending us. It really helps us reach new subscribers and people who might be interested. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, feel free to give us a rating or review. Again, that is always helpful. If you want to see our first ever live episode, as mentioned, it will be Saturday, October 18th, which probably will have already, actually, I might put this out this week. So maybe it hasn't happened yet, but Saturday, October 18th, Cheerful Earful, Podcast Comedy Festival in Balham at 12 p.m. Me and Megan will be there to talk about all things that are funnier about AI. And we have 2 more episodes. It'll be that episode. And then our last point person is Ms. Hilary Zhang. And we'll be talking about the future of education. So another fun, light topic to close us out. But until then, stay safe, assuming you are. And then take care, guys. All right. Bye.
Bye.